Okay, 4 o'clock. We will call to order the regular board meeting of the Engineering Operations Committee and a special meeting of the board of the West Basin Municipal Water District Board of Directors. So to start, call to order, Mr. General Manager.
Absolutely. I'll start with Director Williams.
Here.
Director Gray.
Here.
Director Deere.
Here.
Director Houston.
Here.
And Committee Chair Alvarez.
Here.
All right.
Do we have any public comments?
We have no public comments here in the room. And I'll check online if there's anyone who would like to recognize themselves to make a public comment. Please do so by raising your hand on the platform. Currently, I do not have raised, and so I will take that as no public comments for today.
Any presentations today?
We have no scheduled presentations, but before we move on to our next item, I'd maybe take a moment based on the conversation you and I had, that you do have a time constraint as the chair and would need to be able to leave by 5:30. Of course, we have a very full agenda for today, and I just encourage my staff to help us manage the time in deference to the director.
For that, if we can then go to the action calendar, and the first item up is 5A, status of filter basin number 8. On that.
Absolutely. And so the status of filter basin number 8 is an ongoing discussion that we've had. And this one came back to the E&O committee, principally because, well, let me just say that you were not present at the time when this was being considered in the full board meeting on December 19th. So the board members felt it was not really appropriate to go forward with considering that item on the action calendar in the boardroom on the regular board meeting. And so they referred it to a future board meeting. And so now we have it here back in the committee, and we're happy to have another conversation here at the committee. And maybe more importantly, the committee recommendation has now been reflected in the agenda, whereas perhaps maybe it was staff recommendation provided to the board in the December 19th meeting. So with that, we can certainly have a discussion around the status of the filter basin, or we can go right into the recommendation.
Do you want to give us a brief overview, and then maybe we can just talk a little bit about, because you're correct, we are revisiting this, I think, for this second time.
Absolutely. So let me ask our engineering manager, Wendell Johnson, if you wouldn't mind giving a brief overview of where we are with the basin, the rationale for taking it offline, and then we could open up the conversation with our directors.
Okay, thank you, Greg, for this, and good afternoon, Chairman, and the rest of the board. As you are aware, you were made aware in an earlier E&O committee meeting that for safety precautions, filter number 8 was taken offline. Filter 8 is part of a total of 14 14 Title 22 filters that the agency operates. And we've been going through the filters systematically and doing repairs to some of the filters. As part of the discovery, it was discovered that there were excessive amount of cracks in the walls of filter 8 and 7. They both share the common wall. And as a precautionary move, the department requested the onboarded consultant engineering company to take a look at an analysis of the filter wall to determine what was the sources of the cracks that were in the filter wall. And it was determined that the walls were overstressed, both in the flexure or bending, as it is referred to, and in the shear mode. And particularly concerning was that in the event of a seismic or earth moving event, that the filter wall would be approximately 83% overstressed. And as a precautionary move, the operations team and the engineering team decided to take filter number 8 offline to reduce the amount of loads and therefore reducing the stress in the filter. And the filter has been offline since about November of this year,
2022.
2022, yes.
Okay, and so with that, we are also going forward with a rehabilitation project to strengthen both filter number 7 and filter number 8. Of course, filter number 8 is the one we're talking about right now. And so with that, I recall, Director Alvarez, your recommendation is to bring the filter back in service while we pursue getting a contract to rehabilitate that basin. We're in the process of pursuing that contract, and we have another item on the agenda to discuss the status of that. But we recommend at the staff level to keep the basin offline.
Okay. We have several board members present today, so I'll start off with Director Williams. If you have questions or comments.
No, thank you.
Any of the directors that are attending virtually, do you have any comments or questions in the staff?
No comment from me.
None for me.
And Director
question.
Houston, do you have any comments?
No question. Thank you.
We had talked a little bit about this before, and the last time that this was presented at the E&O committee, you did give us a technical memorandum that evaluated the condition of that wall that's being stressed. And the overall analysis that was presented to us, the loading on that wall for just the static loading was fine. The wall's not overstressed. And the basin had been in operation based on the design that's there since 1995 approximately when the plant was built. So taking it offline, we've lost the ability to produce recycled water, which we dearly need. And the fact that that wall may or may not need to be repaired, there's the urgency is there. It's not going to collapse. So my question is for the seismic loading, which is the loading where the demand on the structure exceeds the capacity of the design. One, what's the probability of that earthquake? And given that the basin had been operational for basically 25, almost 30 years, or in a few years, we should just put it back in service. So question number one, what is the probability of a seismic event occurring?
And I'll defer
Now,
to,
the seismic event for which this will fail.
I believe that the TMA, the technical memorandum has a 2% chance of seismic event.
So 2% is once every 50 years. So that, the likelihood of that is very minimal. Putting the basin back in service, I think then is more critical in terms of maintaining recycled water and reducing the demand for imported water. So I would like to first make that recommendation, that we recommend that the board do direct the basin be returned into service, while then we pursue the repair or the strengthening, retrofitting of it so that the seismic overloading condition can be addressed.
And if I may, maybe provide some additional context.
Go ahead.
Okay, and so regarding the capacity of the water recycling capacity, as you make a very good point that we're in the midst of a drought, although we have great weather going on now. We need to recycle as much as we can and offset import supply. We happen to be at an opportune moment where the demands that we have in our water recycling system are less than the current capacity that we have at the facility with basin number 7 offline. And so maybe if I could ask Wendell to perhaps provide the exact numbers along those lines.
The average daily demand is about 17.3 million gallons per day. Currently, with the number of filters that are running in the 2 trains, we have about a hard capacity of about 25 million gallons per day. If you were to put filter basin number 8 back online, that would add an additional 2.5 or 3 million gallons per day.
And does that account for basins being offline for cleaning?
Yeah, when I talk about hard demand, it means that one, we're counting the capacity with one basin in a backwash mode cycle.
Okay, and with that, of course, as time continues, demands are likely to, increase, especially as the weather gets warmer and all of that. And so what would be your estimate as to how long of a time would it take before demand would exceed capacity?
The last weekly average has been between 11 to 12 MGD rather than 17. Because we're seeing a lot of rain recently and the demand has been lower. And Veolia actually has been working on filter 9 to be put back online. So we will have filter 9 back online. So currently there's no immediate need for filter 8 to be online to meet the demand. I believe, I don't know how long the construction is estimated to be. Extend beyond that April timeframe, given the fact that there's no additional filters to be having detrimental normally we do see demand pick up right around April. It all depends on the temperature, obviously.
Yeah, and when we get to that point in April, that's when we would start to peak above 25 MGD?
Yeah, it all depends on
Yeah, of course. But I mean, just based on historic observations.
Mine is in repair at this point, so we'll be bringing them today.
So that would give us another 2.5 MGD perhaps. And so with that, we'd be at somewhere around 27, 28 MGD capacity. And so demand will reach that point is our best estimate April timeframe.
Data that I've seen, I mean, it'll start ramping up, but usually in the summer months, I would say that August, September would be our peak. So I think we have ample time to implement the improvements and then we could bring filtering back online.
So possibly by April, we're gonna see the demand coming back up, ramping up to about 25 MGD. I heard Suzanne, right?
Yeah.
And so at that point, it would behoove us to have that capacity in place, and that's gonna be before the structural improvements would be ready to go. So given that the likelihood of that wall failing is very minimal, and the fact that it's been in service for over 25 years without any failures, and that it was designed for a full hydrostatic load, then I think it makes sense to put it back in service as soon as it's possible so that when it's needed. We right now have more capacity than now, but looks like by April, potentially, we'll need that capacity again. And then that gives us time to design and implement the improvement in terms of the bracing of that wall for the seismic as well as the crack seal.
Right. And maybe on that note, I know we have a later info item on exactly that project. But if it's okay with the committee for staff to just provide a real quick update, maybe that'll help us manage the overall time of the meeting.
Okay,
Okay, so if you can, just where are we with that project, you know, that rehabilitation project? And how quickly do we think we're going to get that thing back in service?
Good afternoon, Chairman Alvarez, members of the board. So I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of brief history. The structural improvements were kind of born out of the overall Title 22 filter rehabilitation project. And we performed a structural assessment as part of that project, which just kind of branched into this project. So because of the nature of what we've seen out there, the cracking and the leakage, we did expedite a construction bid package kind of, essentially this was part of that project, but we extracted, you could say, some of the drawing specifications as expedited this. So we did start the solicitation process December 16th last year. We just held a pre-bid meeting last Friday, was attended by 3 construction firms. And on Friday as well, we did hold a on-site job walk at the Edward C. Little facility. So we have a bid opening next Tuesday, January 17th here at the DLD building. And our goal was to present that to the board this month as an action item and present the result of the bid opening and also for consideration to award the project to the lowest bid. So that would be next Tuesday, and we will go to the board at the end of the month.
On the 23rd.
Yes.
Number of calendar days to complete the.
Oh, and the anticipated calendar days is 60 days to complete the project. So obviously we do have the contract phase right after the award. Withholding any, hopefully procuring of the items, you know, there is still bracing and whatnot. Construction, I anticipate would be a month, but we do have 60 days in the contract documents.
So possibly delayed by material procurement?
Maybe. I've spoken to the consultant. They don't anticipate any delays, but if it's just construction, we have it in our contract documents for 60 days from notice to proceed to project completion.
so two things happening here. Clarify it for me. One, we had just this, the original consideration that had been brought to our attention was the structural rehab. And that report basically had a schematic for the rehab, which is a bracing, and then the crack sealing, if you will. And the cost of that in that report was $100,000. So now, I think the Title 22 filter upgrades that you're talking about are not just referring to the structural upgrades, which was what I thought we were talking about. You're saying that you want to fold, and help me understand here, the structural upgrade as part of a bigger filter rehab project.
So the intention was we originally had planned to do these structural improvements as part of the rehab project because we deemed them important to implement. During that project, the design phase, we did conduct this structural analysis, which we're basing this recommendation on. So then, because we deemed it necessary to do that now, we essentially, as you could say, splintered these improvements, expedited their construction now prior to implementing the larger rehab project. So that's where we are.
So if I could just emphasize what Orlando was saying is we took the structural rehabilitation elements out of the bigger project.
Right.
And so we're expediting that, what I call a safety project to mitigate those safety risks. And so that's the limit of the scope.
So, then I'll go back in the item, the first item before us is really the structural item. So on that item, it's a much smaller, scope. It's about $100,000 based on the recommendation that we were looking at in the report that had been given to us.
At that point in time.
So it might be a little bit more, than that today. But it was a pretty straightforward and you just need to get that procured and, we need to make a determination if it's worth doing, given the probability of actual failure. And maybe you can come back on that and say, this is how much the crack sealing is gonna cost versus putting the structural bracing on the wall. I would appreciate knowing what that differentiation is. And then we do need to deal with the bigger project, which is upgrades to the Title 22 filters. But I do think you have a more in-depth presentation, and maybe we need to listen to that presentation before we move forward with that.
That's a whole different discussion.
Yeah, but if I heard Orlando correctly, you're gonna be bringing back to the board a recommendation to award a Title, rehab project.
The seismic.
The seismic.
Just the seismic.
Just-
Right,
This is gonna be on this board meeting?
yeah, 23rd.
It's gonna be about the three
I mean,
bids.
the
What's your low
recommendation-
bid now?
Bids haven't been.
Bids are due next week. So, we will present those to
But that's basically for the bracing and the crack seal.
we're also doing, concrete beam depth. We're adding to the concrete beam depth. There are perpendicular to those north walls. So there's a couple improvements, but yes, I think the bracing, concrete beam depth and the crack sealing. For filter 7.
They didn't talk much about the concrete being in the report. Maybe you can point
is-
out where that was.
We have a packet page we can.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna try to find right now. I apologize.
And forgive me for not properly introducing Orlando Rodriguez, our senior engineer in the engineering department.
Look on, on agenda packet, page 115. You'll see there's a figure at the very top that shows in green the steel lateral bracing. And you'll see the kind of yellow-orange. So we'll be increasing the depth of those concrete beams by approximately, I think, a foot. That's southward. That will also help with the load capacity of those walls. You kind of discuss it at the bottom of table 2.7. Beam depth extension and the stainless steel beam bracing.
Okay. But we're still talking the same thing. The total
Yeah.
project cost was 100,000 for that. So it'll be interesting to see, and arguably this engineering analysis and a cost estimate is now about 1.5 years old. So it'll be interesting to see where the numbers are. Figures can probably be quite a bit more given what's happening, the cost of construction. So, all right, so we'll have a presentation on the actual numbers and the bids on the 27th.
On the 23rd.
Okay, so with that, are you okay if we move forward with the recommendation?
Staff's recommendation?
The recommendation to direct returning the units into service, whether they do it now or by April 25th, while the structural improvements are being made.
That is staff's recommendation.
That is the recommendation before us, yes.
Well, that's actually the committee recommendation.
The committee.
That's the committee recommendation.
Committee recommendation.
Correct.
Yes, that's what's here.
Who's the committee?
It is you, me, and Don Deere is our alternate.
So, and we made that recommendation.
That's what we're gonna make if we agree to move that forward to the board.
And that is not staff's recommendation?
That's recommendation, I believe they would rather not having direction to put this basin into service.
The staff recommendation is to keep the basin offline until the structural improvements are complete in which time we will immediately return the basin back into service.
And your,
My recommendation, and what I think we should be recommending to the board, is that the basin be put back into service when it's needed, and that they move forward with the structural repairs. They're not critical. That basin was in service for 25 years without failure, and it's only overloaded on seismic condition, and the event of that seismic event is a 2%, very minimal.
so you are making a more of a, your motion is to, not really go with staff's recommendation. If we accept your comments as a motion,
I think the report is the recommendation that Director Alvarez indicated is in the report.
okay, but he's making a motion. That motion would be not going with the recommendation of staff. Because if we would take his motion, are you putting that, if you put that in the form of a motion, how would it sound?
Sound as follows. The motion is that the board direct the general manager to return filter basin number 8 to service and authorize the general manager to enter the contract the bracing of the northerly wall to avoid the potential failure in the event of a major earthquake in an amount not to exceed $100,000 to be funded from operating revenues. Now, that was based on, or is based on the cost estimate in this report. We will hear a revised estimate when they actually open the bids.
Okay, then if that's
And at that point, you would change that dollar amount.
then if that is the case, I would move your motion.
So with that, we're done with this item and move on to the next one.
Yes.
All right, well, that takes us to action calendar item number 2, which is our geographic information system software agreement renewal. And we have our geographic information specialist, Mr. Chandler Shields, here to give the presentation and the recommendation. Chandler, please. And I believe this is Mr. Shields' first opportunity to present before this committee.
Is this the Mr. Shields?
Anyways, yeah, thank you very much. West Basin utilizes a software platform called ArcGIS for mapping recycled water distribution system assets, service area boundaries, field operator data entry, district mapping needs, and hydraulic modeling. Software is essential to geographic information systems. Around here at West Basin, the one that is in place. I think it's important to note that GIS is not only visualizes where assets are, but tells stories about their utility as well as where the district is going with them. Esri's ArcGIS platform is the industry standard for GIS software. Partner agencies, including Metropolitan Water Districts, LADWP, LA SAN, WRD, all licensed ArcGIS software, products and services as well. West Basin currently maintains an agreement with Esri, allowing our ArcGIS platform to be used for the following. So I'm going to go into a little bit of detail on how the district is using it currently. Both maps, distribution system assets for analysis, presentations of reports, develop and utilize interactive maps as well for distribution operations and the West Basin website. In addition to making maps for other departments, other department use cases include water resources and policies GIS screening tool for its grass replacement plus pilot program. This tool screens applicants for eligibility, specifically if they reside in disadvantaged communities in West Basin service area. Our GIS platform also allows the district to manage digital records of distribution system drawings. Important to note that as of this year, according to existing legislation, SB 865, new subsurface installations must be mapped using GIS and maintained as permit records of the operator. And the ArcGIS platform allows the district to collect field operator data as well as respond to public utility requests. West Basin's contracted distribution systems operator Infomark is now entering underground service alerts directly into the district's GIS as well as the alert. Finally, the ArcGIS platform allows West Basin to perform hydraulic modeling. Existing ArcGIS software license will conclude its 3-year term in March. As a result, staff requested a quote from Esri for a new 3-year agreement, which is included as attachment A. Agreement will grant West Basin access to several ArcGIS tools and extensions and include maintenance service for all the software offered through the term of the agreement. Also included in the agreement are server level programs that support mapping for West Basin's website. To further expand the staff utilization of the various ArcGIS tools, online training is provided as well for staff. As described in attachment B, Esri's sole service justification letter. Esri is the sole source provider of their products and related maintenance services in the U.S. commercial, state, and local government marketplace. If the software license is not renewed, the district GIS program would be severely restricted. So basically, as it benefits West Basin, the software renewal will allow West Basin to continue utilizing the GIS program that is in place. And I will just now read the staff recommendations before us. That the board authorize the general manager to enter into a new 3-year agreement with Esri for license of its software platform ArcGIS from March 21st, 2023 through March 23rd, 2026. Not to exceed amounts of $82,500. Questions that I'd be happy to answer or hear any comments.
Director Williams.
The general manager, is this,
The Esri software is a best-in-class software. It's an industry standard for GIS applications as described by Mr. Shields. And so I highly recommend, I highly stand behind the recommendation that is being made today.
very good, thank you.
And I think it's really remarkable to hear that Infomark is directly entering substructure information right into our tool. So that means we're getting real-time field data added into our database, and that's valuable information.
I have.
Any other directors have any questions or comments?
No, thank you.
Nope.
Okay, hearing none. So basically, this is the re-up of the license for. Hey, now, did they increase the, just interested,
Yeah, 10%.
that increase? Bit more than inflation, but that's how we get inflation.
That 10% over the 3 years or?
Yeah, 10% for each year.
30.
So,
For each.
yeah,
Basically, right now, we're paying an annual license, and we'll be paying 10% more for the same annual license
correct.
for the next 3
For
years.
the next year.
Okay, so we'll move that recommendation forward, Director Williams.
Concur.
Thank you. All right, well, that completes our action calendar.
The action calendar takes us to the information calendar, and we have a big project that's moving forward, and that's the Palos Verdes Recycle Water Pipeline, and we have an update on that project.
Yep, and I'm pleased to introduce Veronica Javia, our engineering supervisor, who is also the project manager for this very critical project. So Veronica, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, directors. Yes, I'm happy to let you know that we are in the process of leading the project for the pipeline segment. And we started that process on December 15, 2022. And we had a pre-bid meeting on January 5th, 2023 this year. And there was approximately 5 to 6 contractors that attended the meeting. The meeting was not mandatory, so that doesn't mean that these are the only contractors that might be leading the project. And the one change, so this board memo was actually produced in December. So we had to extend the bid to date due to the fact that under the loan agreement, there's a specific information regarding a requirement for contractors to do a good faith effort in reaching out to disadvantaged businesses, enterprises. And that particular effort requires them to advertise in publications, newspapers, for example, for 2 consecutive days. So contractors reach out to West Basin and requested. So what we did, we reviewed information and basically we extended the due date to February 6th, which is few days before the ENO meeting, a couple of days before the February board meeting, ENO meeting, sorry. So our plans are like to have those results summarized and just present results as they come in, as those apparent bids results are, gonna be presented to that committee. And then at the February board meeting, we'll provide the recommendation for construction. So that's basically the update in regards to the pipeline. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Director Williams, do you have any questions? Any other directors have any questions? So we're going to talk about both.
Thank you.
Also update us. I'm sorry, Director Gray?
No, thank you.
You're then going to also update us on the status of the pump station?
Yes, so for the pump station, we are working with the city of Torrance on finalizing the permit. Essentially, Garnet Fleming, which is the designer, has produced the 100% design submittal, and we're like in the process of basically getting a couple of responses from the city of Torrance in order to submit to them for final review. So once the city basically approves those plans, then we are basically ready to go. Again, because this project, the pump station, be it as a separate package, basically the requirement for contractors to advertise for disadvantaged businesses outreach will be also a component that we will be taking into account. So it will be a component of that. So we'll be adding those days to that advertising.
So do we have an advertised date that we're shooting for?
We need to get the final permit from the city of Torrance. And that's the final, basically, point that we're trying to finalize with them.
So let's go back to just the pipeline. So you extended the bid opening,
Yes.
and I know you mentioned it, but I didn't write it down.
Yes, so the regional due date was January 17, 2023, and we extended it through February 6, 2023.
At the pre-bid meeting, how many contractors did you have?
We had 5 contractors.
And currently, the overall budget is, I think the last time we talked about this, that the budget was going to be revised based on current construction costs. So where are we budget wise?
No changes since then.
Okay, so the overall budget for just the pipeline is how much?
The overall budget for the pipeline, it was, I believe, 7,415,000. I want to say that. Sorry, I'm going by memory here.
Would it be the 14,870,000?
Yeah, that's the total project cost. So the original project was, there was like approximately $1 million extra that we added. So the overall pipeline project was like 7 million and some change.
Pipeline 7 million and the pump station 7 million on this one?
No, it's,
14
it
is-
was 2 million.
Oh, okay, so the rest of the costs are the engineering, the construction management,
Correct. Community outreach, all other services that we have utilized along with the project. So that's the overall.
Mr. Chair,
yes, sir.
quick question. the five contractors who was that?
Attended.
Where were they from? Were they in our region or?
Yeah, they're, over, I mean, they're in different places. They've done, I can tell you, I don't know if I can say who they
You
are.
can-
Is that okay?
yeah.
Okay, so it was basically Vito Artikovich, it was Coalition Sons, T.E. Roberts, I believe it was Blois, and Doty Brothers. So those are contractors that in the past have done pipeline projects for us. Those are also good sized contractors. I'm pretty
Usual
confident that
suspects.
anybody can do those, yeah, to do a project.
Thank you.
So we have good experiences with all of them.
There are a couple more there because you might get 5 bids, you may not.
Yeah, and it wasn't a mandatory meeting, so it's still a possibility for other contractors to be able.
Oh, it was
to-
not mandatory.
No, it was not.
Oh,
mandatory.
okay.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure that we got a good, what is the, number of contractors, so that's why we didn't tie it to a mandatory meeting.
Then once they showed up and probably are gonna get 5 bids, at least. Pretty good. Okay, so if we can move this, or.
This is-
Stand all items.
Continue, it's gonna come back after your, next month for recommendation to move it forward for award.
That's right.
Okay, when you come back next month, maybe you can give us a little summary table, for all of the costs, what the original estimate was, and then we'll know what the, at least for the pipeline, we'll know what the actual cost is based on the, low bid. And I guess at the time you'll also present us with a bid summary of all the bids.
Yes, that information will be provided.
Okay, thank you very much. If there's no other questions, we'll move on to the next information item, and that's the West Coast Base Water Barrier Treatment Barrier Operations.
Thank you for that, Chair. So we have our Senior Operations Engineer, Susanna Lee, who is here to present on our barrier operations. And I believe we have an interested party in this topic sitting right behind her.
Good to see this, yeah.
Susanna, please.
Okay, good afternoon, Director. So, we can go to the next slide. I'm gonna provide a brief overview on our barrier systems and all the components that make up the barrier systems, as we call it. And then go over like all the different components and how that play into Chevron as well as barrier system and how they interact and what other constraints. And then go over the previous water deliveries data and then what the current status is. Next slide. A brief overview of our system. Obviously, we have the source water from the Hyperion, and the purple circle includes all the different treatment components for the various systems, the ozone and the RO, and then the AOP, and then the stabilization. And then the other component that is important to the various system is the blending station, which we'll go over briefly in the next slide. Allows the county to pull in potable water. And obviously, if you go back to the previous slide, we have the injection wells on the bottom. So all of this, how West Basin have no control of how the injection wells are being operated. Obviously, they're operated by how much ever like recycled water versus potable water they want is all, we get directions from the county time to time and how much they would like to see. Moving on to the barrier blending station, next slide. Just want to emphasize that when we bring recycled water out to the blending station, obviously there's connections of metropolitan water, potable water into the North Lake versus the South Lake. So the county has the ability to isolate certain portion of the injection depending if a maintenance needs. And so we see, I think the majority of the injection is happening in the South Lake. Fun fact that to bring to your attention is that we'll be able to also through this blending system, we're able to bring potable water reverse. We tremendously helped us last year when the Hyperion upset. It helped us to improve the to get that time. So I want to say there are many components that make up the barrier system, and the ultimate injection production is controlled by the county. So can move on to the next page. Here is a brief permitting history. So I know you all probably have seen different version of this, but main takeaway on this slide is that each one of those permitting points in 1995, 1997, 2006, those kind of marry up with the construction phases at ECL. So we get the permit to inject maximum of 5 MGD. So our phase 1 design capacity at that point was 5. Allowable permitted injection recycled water into the basin, and we designed the system at that individual time point in time for maximum instantaneous production. That does not mean that that was the need at that point, but that is the requirement that we have to permit for the maximum instantaneous that we can possibly put into the system. And by 2012, we were permitted to go 100%, and that 100% minimum of 17.5 MGD. If you go to the confusion, like we talked about 17.5, why we haven't seen 17.5 MGD in barrier of recycled water. As this chart alluded to, we have permitted, and then we have the instantaneous design capacity, which is 17.5. But ultimately, our contract with WRD is 17,000 acre feet a year, which equates to about 15.5 MGD. So I just want to clarify the 17.5 versus 17.2 MGD. So which will be important going to the future slides. So now we talked about the 17.5 to, but there are other constraints that really limited us in the past, how much recycled water flow that we actually could use at the plant. So the next slide, can we go to the next slide? One of the main factors that limited us of the barrier operation timeline is the water quality, changing water quality. And what I want to say is that a lot of the early design and studies were, the design points were all the way back at the beginning, 1995 or even earlier. So the pilot studies and all the feasibility study were done in the water quality. We were looking at 25 ppm of ammonia and around 10 ppm of total suspended solids. And so during phase 1, phase 2, we were using obviously those early year water quality. And as the graph alluded to, the water quality have deteriorated, or the parameters have increased over time and has significantly increased recently due to conservation. And also one other point I do want to point out is that since late 1990, like I believe in 1996, Hyperion looked into a new technology at that point to help them to increase their, because they saw exponential growth during that time with their plan. So they need to be able to have. They changed it to high purity oxygen as the treatment for the secondary treatment. So with the high purity oxygen treatment, which was brought online around 2000, have changed the biology and the fouling potential of the water greatly. What a traditional wastewater treatment plant, you will see an SRT anywhere between a minimum of 3 to maybe upward of 10 days. The high purity oxygen change it to right now. The bugs don't have as much time to chew up all the biology in the water. And what we have now by then is the water is remaining with like high, long chain polysaccharides type water that we get. Consequence is that it affects the microfiltration performance. But remember what I pointed out, a lot of the studies and the design of early phase microfiltrations was done based on the early year 1990s type of water quality. So they didn't foresee changing the water quality in the 2000s, obviously. So that played an important factors in how our various systems have been operated, which I will go over later in a couple of slides. That's one factor in water quality. The second factor is now with Chevron, our refinery customer brought online, that brought shared assets into our various systems. So if you can turn to the next slide. Is meant to show like the different phases. Phase 1, we had a conventional filter as a pre-treatment for the various system. We didn't have any microfiltrations at that time because that was still at the cost of development. And so with our trains 1 and 2, at that time, with each total design capacity for those trains were 5 MGD. And then phase 2, which brought online around 1997, we have that was when we have phase 2 MF membranes brought online. That is a total of 5 MGD. So, and then also we have our train 3. So by 1997, that's when Chevron was brought, our customer brought online in about 2000, 2001 timeframe. We have phase 3 MF. They're the same MF technology, which is the polypropylene, using the original design, the water quality design. That's important because they were not using the latest phase 5 membranes that allow a more aggressive cleaning regime. So we saw a lot of fouling during phase 2 and 3. By the time Hyperion switched over to the high purity oxygen operations. Obviously, we have phase 4. Phase 4 was also designed with the polypropylene membranes. And so at the beginning or since the inception or the commissioning of phase 4, we were never able to see the true design. Phase 5, obviously, that's when we had brought in the newer type of microfiltration membranes, and which added about 14 originally, and with the expansion that was completed in 2019, we were up to 18. Notes on the right-hand side, just wanted to bring you update what the status are for each of those systems. So for ROs 1 and 2, we updated to 6 MGD by phase 2. However, some of the pre-treatment system weren't updated, so there's some limitations there. Phase 2 and phase 3 MF membranes have been decommissioned due to all this the more than double ammonia level in that system that really put all the plastic to be very brittle. So by 2016, we commissioned phase 2 membranes. And by 2018, we decommissioned, put system, phase 3. Currently, obviously, we have phase 4 MF and then phase 5 MF for the barrier and Chevron. We did add in 2 mobile microfiltration units to help and subsidize the microfiltration. But for all of phase 5 and the mobile trailer membranes, the microfiltration membranes have been compromised or been greatly affected, similar to the phase 4 membranes, which we did come to the board last year and they have been replaced. So now we're looking at signs that phase 5 membranes and the mobile trailer membranes need to be replaced. So I just want to share that because now phase 2 and 3 are put offline, so we have been using barrier assets, which are the phase 4 and phase 5, as well as on our own side, we are sharing our train 3 between barrier as well as the Chevron system. So there are a number of shared systems that affect both production ability for barrier and Chevron. And the next slide, page 33, sorry. The purpose of this slide on the left-hand side, I'm sorry, it's kind of small on the screen. It's really to showcase what the production needs, the membrane throughput requirement that was to meet the barrier contractual requirement of 15.2, and then the low pressure of 1.7 MGD, and then for the high pressure of 2.6 MGD. So to meet all of this production, we need between 24 to 27 MGD of MF filtrate. And for RO, we need 22 MGD of first pass RO, and obviously 2.6 MGD of second pass RO. The chart on the right is now the modified design capacity. Remember, phase 2 and 3 are now put offline for the most part. So with the modified design capacity, we have up to 30.3 instantaneous capacity for the MF. And then we have 22 first pass RO, second pass we have 3.9. So, but in the real world operation scenarios, we would always have something offline due to maintenance or cleaning and whatnot. So with the sustainable design capacity, MF is about 23 MGD, and for first pass is 19 MGD, and second pass is 2.6. So from this chart, we are short 3 MGD on a sustainable manner of MF and RO to meet all of the contractual requirements. On to page 34. Show now just pulling all the information that I talked earlier, kind of explaining why some of the production were able to meet the production. One, we're just starting our recycled water system. We're able to meet that 5 MGD permitted. Now phase 2, we're up to 7.5 MGD. So between 1997 to about 2000, you can see that, we're doing good at the conventional filter, about 5 MGD and then 2.5 MGD of phase 2 MF. So that was still in the high purity hasn't changed over to the high purity oxygen water yet. So for the most part, we're able to meet the but by the time that 2000, 2001 timeframe, that's when phase three came online, Chevron was brought online, and we are already seeing effect due to the change in water quality. And obviously the ammonia was higher by then, and as well as higher TSS. What that does to affect our system was we had to do more cleaning than anticipated. The amount of fouling to do the system was a lot more than designed and than anticipated. So what happened on those recycled water time is when phase two needed to be replaced, as well as phase three, we weren't seeing the production that we need. So we weren't able to meet that 7.5. By the time that phase four brought online, phase four was also seeing a lot of timeline. The phase two membrane lasted about 7 years. We'll have to replace, but phase four membranes by the third year because of the water quality was severely affecting the production. So, but I think the good news you can see to take away is that after phase five and we have changed out to the newer type of membrane, we were able to meet between 80 to 95 in the barrier system. And so the 15.2, we were able to meet that. And then moving on to the next chart, is really showing the current barrier injection production. We just came off from the Hyperion offset, and by July and August, we didn't get all of the phase four membrane installed till August. So we were still just slowly ramping up production. And right now we are at the capacity to do 10.5 mg, but not in a sustainable way. You see those bumps and whatnot because of the phase five membranes. We're seeing more and more need of pinnings and cleaning. So, and lastly, the last chart, the last slide, is to talk about the current operation and what the status. The chart like that, we have a throughput, close throughput of 19 MGD of infiltrates. And if you recall earlier from the previous slide, we need between 24 to 27, 26 and if you subtract out about around 6 MGD of MF filtrate, we would have about 12 to 13 MGD of MF filtrate for barrier, so which really limits us to about 11 to 12 MGD currently. This is due to high membrane condition as well as we're seeing that may not be due to Hyperion upset, but also due to age. The system now is about 20. A lot of those compressors are still original install system. We are seeing not the optimum operation point, so that increased MF value. The MF are not getting the needed air to help cleaning or in operations. And then we have a few pumps that we should get those back by the end of this month. So we have a transfer pump 16, and then we have a couple of product pumps that have been. With those pumps back, we should be able to ramp up to 12 mg. Again. So lastly, I just want to close out this presentation with the long-term sustainable needs. In order for us to meet that 15.2 MGD sustainably, we need to replace the lost Chevron microfiltration capacity, phase 2, phase 3 membrane system. And we need to add additional RO capacity to Chevron because we are borrowing a lot of our train 3. So when a lot of our design, we design for the contractual limit, but we forget about the maintenance side. We forgot about the reliability side. So we need extra train viable for maintenance and cleaning. So we minimum of 3 MGD. The CIP system, because you have we have Chevron system and Berry system. All those our trains are really shared with just one single CIP system. So when we have a quality upsets or events, and a lot of those our trains will be lining up to do cleaning. And one of those cleaning, depending on how severe, it will last between 3 to 5 days. So if we have multiple trains that needs to be cleaned, in order to meet those construction requirements, we would need an IP system that would help to speed up the cleaning process. Then all of our electrical system and VFDs there at that end of useful life, we're seeing more and more outages on those critical components. So those needs to be rehabbed, and along with the compressors and blowers that we mentioned, and the rehab of our RO pretreatment system and as well as approach treatment system. And last but not least, because our treatment system at ECL is really interconnected, we really need the filters to be installed and to be reliable as well, because all the backwash that happens on our membrane system goes back to the front of the Title 22 system. So they treat, filters do treat a significant amount of all of the backwash. If we do not have filters, then we do that.
Go ahead, Director Jim. Oh, he's leaving. He was just speaking up. Okay, thank you, Susanna. So do you have any questions, Director Williams?
What did you say? It's amazing. Who's your counterpart at Suez? Or are you from Suez? Are you from us?
From here.
He's one of ours.
Wow,
We're so lucky.
you are amazing. I mean, what with all this stuff?
And how many years were we recognizing you for today?
10 years.
9 years.
That's the brightest.
Where did you go to college?
Michigan.
Michigan.
So for master.
You don't have a PhD? Sounds like you do.
How about your bachelor's? Boilermaker. Purdue.
Purdue.
Purdue Boilermaker.
Oh, you were,
Nice to hear about you guys.
Purdue and, yeah, that's good background.
Step downstairs, give us bread.
So, when do you interface with not Suez? I mean, it's now it's
Veolia.
yeah, constant every day.
We don't want, but yes.
But you have to. You must.
Yes.
Van is our senior operations engineer.
We're lucky to have him.
And we are very fortunate
Sounds
to have her on our team.
He says so. I mean, gee. I have nothing more to say, but thank you that you're here. Wonderful.
Director Gray, do you have any comments?
Just echo
Questions?
what Director Williams said. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Did you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Hello?
you. Coming across very clear.
I just said I echo what Director Williams said, but thank you to the staff, young lady who gave the report. Thank you.
And Director Houston, do you have any comments?
Just echoing the same comments, actually a great report, very thorough. So thank you very much to our staff.
And may I add, we had acknowledged Susanna Lee also serves in a leadership capacity for one of the industry groups. I don't remember the name of the industry group, so you'll have to maybe help me out there. But you're on the board, I believe. And that's an acronym for?
Southwest Membrane Operation.
Mouthful.
And you're on the board, right?
Yeah, I just.
Elected last year.
Elected.
Right in.
Right in.
You said you ran for that position?
I'm sorry.
Did you campaign for that
You
position?
wrote her in and,
Oh, I see.
but her reputation sees her, so people were very willing to vote for her.
Okay, very good. Wow.
Well, it means that you have more work to do. I'd like to talk a little bit about the barrier operations itself. So right now, we're contracted with WRD to produce or deliver 12.5 MGD if I. Right, let me go back and,
15.2.
oh, 15.2, not 12.5. 15.2. Oh. Have we ever delivered 15.2?
We could deliver up to 16 MG back in 2017, 2018.
And, but typically we're delivering quite a bit under that.
The graph you displayed at the end shows we're currently delivering about 10 MGD. Or that's the total in the county, total,
That's the total.
potable plus.
Injected into the barrier.
Right now, we're showing about 10 MGD. If the barriers can take more water, which they can, why is the barrier operation not injecting more water into the basin?
Sorry, do you mean from the county and WRD's point of view or from our?
I'm looking at the bigger regional picture. Because as we're moving forward and trying to get people to augment their water supply from the groundwater basin and diminish the use of imported water, we need to really think about the barrier operation. And I agree, it's a tri-party operation, kind of the discussion that needs to take place, in that WRD plays a role, we play a role, and LA County Public Works plays a role since they're the owners of the barrier. So within that tri-party, our role is limited, but we can just still discuss kind of what the potential is, how much water can be put into the basin through the barriers, and why they're being operated in a certain way. So right now, that decision in operating the barrier is driven by which of the three parties, or all parties?
So the requests come from the county specifically on, let's say, a daily or weekly basis. Our goal is always to be able to meet their requests. And every 4 months, WRD, the county and West Basin, we'll call it the technical team, gets together, looks at the chloride levels, really looks at it more at the barrier function, to answer your question. So I think that's kind of the technical team. Are we keeping chlorides out? once a year, WRD gets, looks at the annual budget, and I think that would be maybe, Director, maybe more of the policy discussion. Let's try to get those numbers up. And that discussion happens maybe other times, but annually where we're engaged in that, and ask from a point of view, can you produce more? Where are we at, or what are we looking at? But I think it's a good point because there's sort of that barrier seawater intrusion portion of it that we really focus on, just answering to the county what they need and being able to get there. That's when we come to you, to make
Right.
improvements. And at the level of what should be going in there, can West Basin staff at least isn't really, at least our operations staff is not really engaged at that level, other than being able to maybe suggest what we could produce or what it would take to produce.
But our engagement would be critical because at some point it does drive what you just mentioned is how much are we gonna have to produce and are we gonna be able to deliver that? And
I think the current purpose is like the original purpose of this system is really on the seawater intrusion area, right? So I guess away from that, and so that will be required more discussions with the three parties if we are changing purpose of that.
And although the barrier was put there primarily for the seawater intrusion and to basically keep the salt water out, most of the water that we put into the barrier goes inland. And there's about 5 to 10% leakage that goes to the ocean. But the majority of that water does go to replenish the basin. And so I'm just kind of thinking ahead here as we're looking at bigger regional roles and shifting water production by our purveyors from imported water to using greater amount of groundwater. The barrier is one of the main systems of maintaining an equilibrium in the West Basin. And replenishing the West Basin. So we're way under using the barriers is what it sounds like. And that there could be quite a bit more usage of the barrier. In the discussions that go on, WRD contracts for 15.2 MGD, and we don't ever deliver that much water in terms of recycled water to the barrier. So is there a way to move us in that direction? I'd like to see us shift more recycled water into the barrier. So ultimately, one of the things that we have talked about doing is increasing, and kind of repeating myself here, increasing groundwater production. So we need to make sure that we're going to be in a position to use those barriers more effectively. So right now, if I heard you correctly, and correct me, we don't really have the capacity to maintain a 15.2 MGD delivery to the barriers.
I think with new membranes and if we have all those wish list on the item, we will right now without additional RO, we can have up to 14 to 15. 14 and a half at least if we don't have to borrow RO3 or Chevron. So.
But yeah, and maybe
So we
a
need to
misunderstanding.
replace the
Don't we?
baseline membranes.
Isn't some of the production from the MFRO processes diverted to Chevron? And that takes a priority over the barrier. So between the demand for Chevron, we don't, assuming everything's working correctly and you're maxed out, you don't have capacity to maintain both the Chevron demand and the barrier demand.
If we able to replace the baseline membranes and the trade, or is operating in its optimum MF capacity. The limited would be on the RO. On a sustainable way, we would have to borrow our capacity to have 17 and a half. But like you have to go to CIP, then you take at least one train offline, so that's at least a minimum of 2. So we would be able to meet that 15 and a half, 15.2. But when we have to borrow that train 3 from, or we have one more train from Barrier to be in CIP, then that's when we'll make.
Our contract with Chevron and takes the priority or does not. So we always take the first amount of water and we go make sure that Chevron's gonna be taken care of. And then whatever's left over is the water that's gonna go to the barrier. We need to, I think, as we move forward, we really need to start thinking about that. And what are we gonna need to do to make sure that we're gonna be able to maintain our contractual relationship with Chevron, and which may or may not change. But what can we do to increase our production for the purposes of replenishing the groundwater basin?
Yeah, that's.
And then in terms of operating the basin, even if you just go to the graph that you presented, where right now you're operating around 10 MGD, there's always imported water being used, which always, I could scratch my head and go, why are we using imported water when we're in a situation where we want to diminish that? And I've been told in the past that that's LA County has decided to do that. And doesn't seem like there's any real good reason for it, except that operationally they just like the convenience.
Yes, they operationally, we've had lots of discussions, even when we could produce exactly what was asked for recycled water. Operationally in the past, time before operations, it was mentioned that they always wanted to be able for operational ease to have that valve somewhat open. There was a difference. It took an actual person to close a valve, to be there or to open it back up, is what I've been told. The varying amounts and what they choose and why there's more amounts sometimes than others, we're not really sure what the reason for that is. If they're not using it as makeup water, because we can't provide that. But we've been told they will always maintain a small amount of potable water on an operational basis to keep their valve open.
I can understand having the connection because when we have a shutdown like happened with the Hyperion upset, then we need to get water to it. That makes total sense from a reliability and a redundancy point of view as an operator, right? 100% there. What I have a harder time with is the continual use of imported water when it's not necessary. And we can meet, like at the 10 NGD right now, we can meet that demand. When it's higher, we can't, but when we can meet 100% of the demand, that just, it's a waste of imported water. Might be worthwhile, this is more for policy and the general manager, if we start thinking about approaching this on a more regional basis, and we've been talking about just the regional water supply and just the changing nature of the water supply that we're providing, that maybe we start forming a group to operate the barriers. Right now, this is kind of a tri-party operational group with the county in the lead as the owners. And by the way, I'm never thinking of taking ownership of that. Other county taxpayers have paid for that investment through the Flood Control District Act, and it's something for the county to own. But we might want to think about a more formal arrangement for the actual management and operation of the barrier, especially as we move forward on a regional basis. So what I suggest is that we explore the idea of some kind of JPA or a more formal committee that consists of West Basin, the Water Replenishment District, and the county. With not having one party, that is the county, dictating the operation, but that the entire group come up with the operation, and that we shift over more and more to the 100% import, I'm sorry.
Recycled water.
Recycled water and 0% imported water, unless we cannot meet that. And we'll talk later about what we need to do to increase our capacity to meet the demand if we can ever get more production or more water into that barrier. So if we can start thinking about that, and maybe that's a multi level approach where it's done at the technical level, where the group that meets now starts approaching that subject, and then more at the executive level and even at the board level where we might want to start talking to the supervisors, because I think that if the public knew that we had the capacity to provide 100% recycled water at the level of operation right now, and we're still using imported water, and telling everybody that they have to cut back and conserve additional water, doesn't serve a good public purpose. And we should really be pushing that on a bigger regional basis. I know that the assistant general manager from the Water Replenishment District is here, so I don't know if he might want to comment on the idea of that, but and it's not just this barrier, there's other barriers, and I think that the county operates them all the same way. So it's, in looking at that, I want to think about that. So if you could start exploring that on a bigger basis, I don't know if Director Williams, you have any thoughts on that?
No, nothing other than it sounds like a good idea. And it's got to be at a level that's above us.
We certainly have the assistant director of WRD here, assistant general manager of WRD here. So love to hear his thoughts on that approach because they certainly are the lead partner with LA County. So Rob, if you'd like to share some thoughts.
Just overall, and thanks for the presentation, actually, but a lot today too, actually. Just overall at the barrier, last year, I think we put in 11,000 acre feet. And so it gets back to even with your capacity, and certainly we at WRD want, and obviously we've contracted to do 100%. So I don't think that even getting up to like 15 MGD for a while until the pumping really comes back, we're going to need that much. But I know that the county does set the number, and I think we budgeted last year for 16,000 acre feet of the barrier. So they're certainly operating at less, but both the West Coast barrier and Alameda's, Dominguez Gap's a little bit different just because there's some technical issues there, but we're facing the same thing as far as leaving those valves open and Public Works insisting that valves stay open for some amount of water. But technically, on your end, on this West Coast barrier, I don't know if it's as needed as much as potentially on the Alameda's barrier. And I only say that because I think you have more storage and more water available. So it seems like we should be able to operate that a little bit better. But I think that, a lot of the limitations are just still kind of the Public Works mindset of how these barriers have to operate to get them to kind of adopt the 100% recycled mantra is still something that we need to achieve. So working together, I think, would be something that's very.
And Uzi had mentioned the technical group that gets together every 4 months. Perhaps that's a good starting point to begin this kind of conversation.
Yeah, and we do the same thing at the Alameda's barrier. But
Everett's there.
yeah. And Uzi's right. At the end of the day, essentially they set it, but they don't change it that often. And really the demand at the barrier doesn't change that much when they go back and forth. But like I said, right now, their whole, like I said, we put in 11,000 feet last year, I think it was. So I think you guys have enough capacity for that at 100% at that level. But like I said, we certainly encourage these other upgrades to make sure we can get up to that higher level. If regional practice goes and some additional pumping goes as we're hoping, we're expecting the demand to go back up to the kind of what the historical levels have been.
Given as we move forward into the future, and the future is here, one, we want to increase that demand for groundwater. Two, we want to diminish or increase the amount of recycled water, maximize the amount of recycled water that's going into the barrier. And just looking at the operation for the last 5 months, been as much as 5 MGD, 6 MGD of imported water that's been going into the barrier. And currently they're running about 1 MGD of imported water, where we right now have the capacity to meet 100% of that demand for recycled water. So it's going to take some time to evolve a group like this and work on it. But if we don't start it sooner, the sooner we get it started, the better we are.
That's very good. And I'm happy to share that in the executive forum that's been convened under Adele Hochul's leadership, we both, WRD, West Basin, and LA County are all at the table together.
Yep.
And so we have a very ripe opportunity both to advance these discussions at the technical working group level and at the general manager level.
Then the other thing is, our role, even though it seems like we're the third party at the table, that the bigger parties are being LA County as the owner and operator of the barrier, and WRD as operator or the caretaker of the basin have a bigger role, and WRD does pay for the water. We do have the operating permit in terms of the Title 22 permit. I shouldn't say operating permit, but the Title 22 permit falls on us. So we do have a permitting role, and we're permitted to put up to 17.5 MGD into the barrier. I don't think it's ever happened. Maybe it happened instantaneously, but it would be nice to see that as opposed to.
I think you said it was up to 16 MGD at the highest.
So even though our role may be, we're looked at as the third party, they can't put any water into the barrier without that Title 22 permit, and that's what
But as public agencies, we all have a mutual interest.
We need to start thinking in terms of a regional approach. But as we move forward in terms of our water supply and shifting, you're shifting to more use of local waters as opposed to imported water. This becomes more important.
Absolutely.
So with that, I think it's just a general direction. If you're okay with that,
Yeah,
Director Williams,
yes.
that we start exploring that and coming together. It's easier said than done, and I think you do have a challenge, and it's going to be multifaceted in terms of both at the very technical level, at the executive level, and probably at a political level. You get that?
Is this something that the E&O committee would like to have a periodic
Yes, I think so.
report out? I don't know if monthly would be too
I don't
frequent.
know, monthly is probably too frequency, but I would ask, and if you didn't put it on the agenda, I would ask you to periodically say, hey, I want to know what the status is, where are we moving? How's that barrier operations? How much water we put in for the last 5 months or something like that?
Would you like to have one report in the very near, like one in the immediate month, and then we could figure out the cadence after that?
If it's not too much of, we got a pretty good report today, both in terms of the actual operation of the process for producing the water. I think that Susanna did an excellent job. And the discussion that we've had about the actual, just operating the barrier itself. And we had 3 agencies working on it. So I don't need to see it next month, but I'd like to see it periodic.
Okay. If you're willing to give us a couple months, maybe 3, to get the conversation started.
90 days, you should get it started.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch.
90 days, 30.
93 months. Fantastic. 3 months. We will report back in 3 months, if not sooner.
You can come back sooner, but we don't need to see it every month.
We need to get the conversation started so we have something to.
Started, et cetera.
Right. Okay, fantastic for that direction.
Fine.
Okay,
You said 5:30 was your
yeah,
time.
5:30 is my time and it's 5:30. I know we have, I really didn't want to talk about the recycling water fill station, because that's just something that lingers and doesn't seem to get done, and we've asked for it a long time ago, but given that, I do need to leave, and so
can
unless
step up.
Director Williams, you want to take over, Director Beers gone, who's the alternate?
Okay, then, no.
Okay, so then we will, we'll defer and continue these discussions to our next meeting. We have a lot of information we've read already, so we got some summary on that. But with that, are there any, comments?
Only comments I had,
Director's comments?
that was a great meeting and staff, you did it. You know, that's the old saying that you showed up and you showed out. So you did a good job. Thank you.
And Director Gray and Director Houston, do you have any, director's comments? I think we've made the most.
Warm
This
up.
is Director Houston. It's Director Houston. I just want to say thank you to our staff for the excellent reports and that good conversation. And I do look forward to hearing that report you have asked for coming forward down the road. So appreciate that immensely, Chair Alvarez. And with that, I want to say thanks again. Look forward to our next meeting.
All right, if there's no other comments, I don't have any other comments except to say
Chair
thank you. Dave.
Alvarez.
Great.
Hello. Hello.
Director Gray,
Yeah.
yes.
I'm sorry, I lost the audio for a minute, but I wanted to thank staff for their report today and look forward to future reports from this committee, and thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah, if I may just clarify the disposition of the information calendar. So the first 2 items, I believe, are advanced to the full board as a receipt and file.
That's correct.
Okay, and then the remainder of the items would not advance because we'll hold those for
We'll
future.
move those over to next.
Okay, so only the first 2 items will be receipt and file. Thank you for that.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Susanna. That was a great presentation. I even learned a lot.
I'm sorry, please forgive me. Items G and H are monthly reports and
You should put those in the.
receipt and file. Okay, thank you. Thank you, team. Thank you, Susanna, for an excellent report. Thank you, Veronica. Thank you, the whole team.
With that, this meeting is.
All right.